There's just one small session that has been pending, which is basically envisioning the future that Ajay was requesting for, not a timeline, but how everything will come together. So that is a HIEAF session that will be presented by Krishan Bharadwaj. Krishan sir?
Yeah, Priyanka, thank you. So, so HIF is the Health Information Exchange and Analytics Framework design, what we have put together in XSL. And as we started our session in the morning today with the India architecture and then the MDHP. So this is a core, objective of the MDHP building blocks to achieve federated architecture in the country. And so federated architecture, there are some key design principles MDHB has clearly laid out, and this architectural design what we have put together is sort of sort of implementing the MDHP building blocks in true sense and kind of connecting all the components together to form a pan-India interoperability framework. So I think most of the discussions we have already done in the morning, so I will keep the session short. So key objectives, as we have been discussing, that the E objects and the MDDS, which are the data standards part, they form the core of the underpinning of the federated architecture thing. So we need to have the standardization of data at the system of record level, which is generating the data. And for that, we have already spoken about the translator layers and the MDDS data converter layers, and then converting all the data into the standard E object formats to send it across the interoperability layer. And all this data, need to be exchanged across the different entities to fulfill the workflows, specific workflows in the healthcare, and ingest all that data into the state and central lakes so that meaningful, insights could be derived and used, by the public agencies. Particularly in the condition like COVID, these insights make a lot of, difference in terms of doing the proactive planning and resource optimization to handle the situations like COVID, what we are facing. Next slide, Priyanka. So this is a proposed framework architecture what we have put together, and it is an all-inclusive design based on India and NDHP design principles. So you can see that in the foundation layer we have all the registries what we have spoken about. So these registries are required to provide two things. One is to provide the unique identifiers to all the entities which are participating in the interoperability game. And two, it is the single source of truth of all the data, the attributes related to that entity. So a facility registry, for example, there are the NIM IDs, and then there are MHRR IDs, and different Rohini IDs are there. So ultimately, this facility registry will be correlating all these IDs together so that you can uniquely identify a facility by the different IDs. And then the key goal of MDHM is to provide a citizen ID to all the citizens of country. So ultimately, we need a patient registry, or you can call it a beneficiary registry, or even a master patient index. So that will hold the unique health ID of the patient along with some sort of government verifiable ID, which can be Aadhaar or PAN card or voter card or passport number or whatever. Then all the provider systems, when they are registering the patients, at that time they can have a API lookup to the registry to correlate the local ID of the patient with the unique health ID. So that will help in discovering the patient records across the siloed systems which are existing, and that will make the health system portable and accessible across the country. So if I have taken treatment in Bangalore hospital and I have some local ID generated in that hospital, and later on I move to Delhi and I continue my treatment there with a different ID, so they can still discover my records in both the hospitals and link it together. And we have a specific record locator service in our interoperability layer, which will be sort of discovering all these patient records and linking all these records together. So this feature of interoperability platform that we have designed, makes a complete, aggregated longitudinal view of patient records in a real runtime, and all these different stakeholders can access the past histories and medical summaries of the patient. The other key principle that we have followed is, as we already said, like we need to have the data standardization. So even if the providers are using some sort of local schemas, they should be converting that to the standard, target schema, which is ultimately the MDDS and the EHR standards and the FHIR. So these are the three things. and we have already spoken enough about these things. So this has to be done at the core layer, before allowing the data entry and pushing that into the different repositories. So this health information exchange, it uses multiple repositories. So it is using EHR repositories, which can either be managed by the provider facilities, or these can be managed by the data fiduciary. So data fiduciary is a new term which is introduced in the NDHP, and they will act like a health data bank or sort of custodian of the patient health data, and they will be responsible for managing the standardization, security, privacy, and the consenting part of the data exchange. So if smaller facilities are not going to deploy those technical components, so these larger data fiduciaries can have the FHIR servers at their end, and they can have all the necessary components to ensure the security, privacy, and consent mechanism. So they will act like a consent manager. And then along with the EHR repositories, you will have the PHR framework, where patients can own their health records in their DigiLockers. They can have their last 3 visit data by default, or they can configure to store any number of visits related data into their PHR. And so whenever a demand or request comes from a entity who needs this data access, so that will be accessing the data through these EHR and PHR repositories. And before accessing these PHR and EHR repositories, they will be leveraging the record locator service to discover the patient records and link it together, to make the complete summary of the records. So this gateway, this interoperability layer is pretty based on the simple API bridges and the API gateway approach. So this we call as a HIF API gateway to sort out the confusion between the gateway what Ved described and the gateway what I am talking about. So this is still the functionality of the gateway is sort of same thing. So it is an entry point or entry gate for all the APIs from the different provider systems into the interoperability layer, and all the cross-cutting concerns can be implemented at the gateway level. So then, it will have different adapters to get the data in different formats. So as you know that in the beginning, still there will be a lot of unstructured data available in the market. So there will be adapters like, a PDF file adapter, or even the DICOM file adapter for the DICOM images, along with the FHIR adapters, which will accept all the data as a document reference, FHIR resource. Now coming to one of the questions raised by Pragya in her presentation, that, interoperability API standardization is a challenge. So what we have done in our HIF, it is based on the standardized, HI profiles, which are the HL7, Health Information Exchange profiles for data exchange, and that is integrated with the FHIR standards. And document reference is actually the list of documents that you can publish. So these are all bundled resources, either as the simple patient resource or organization resource, or this can be any e-object, what we are talking about, including our e-discharge summary or e-prescription or anything. And the metadata of those documents will be published as a document manifest object into the registry. So each exchange will have a registry and several repositories. So this registry is sort of a phone book directory, which will contain the addresses of all the locations where patient records are stored. And this record locator service will interact with this registry component to find all the addresses where patient records are stored, and then subject to the patient privacy, security, and consent mechanism, it will take the data from those systems and aggregate it in runtime, and then you display it to the person who has requested it for. So this is a high-level introduction of the HIF thing that I have done. Bring the next slide, please. So one of the other key factor of our design is that it is ensuring that all the data from different repositories, be it PHR or be it EHR, so they should be feeding into the different registries like disease registry, for example. And this is required for managing the disease surveillance part, or kind of finding the outcomes related to the disease progression thing, which is particularly required in the COVID condition. And then it will also be feeding data into several state and central data lakes. So then, in these data lakes, the government can use this for, aggregating the data and doing the analytics on top of that. So one particular thing is, our HIF is a dovetailing into, the data insight project of NHA. So they can use this framework for all the data aggregation and analytics part, and they can, develop the insights, both predictive and the analytics, of that. And then, this particular slide, it talks about how it addresses the need of the country. So specific things are that it allows the data exchange between the stakeholders. So it manages the stakeholder consultation, coordination, sorry, in terms of whoever needs the data, they will be able to access the patient data, the complete longitudinal record of the data. And same time, it enable the patient consenting part and the privacy and security part, which is a core component of the NDHB specifications. And same time, it allows the analytical data lakes for the government so that they can do the insight analysis and they can do the resource planning and optimization accordingly. And besides this, there are more use cases, but it can handle. So it can handle the teleconsultation scenario use case. Now this with the coming of this teleconsultation guidelines, so EMR has become mandatory. And NDHB already talks about standards and all, and the data interoperability part. So this HIF will play a very crucial role in ensuring the data sharing across the different entities. In the next slide. So I think this part I've already spoken about. If somebody has any question, I will be happy to answer that. And one of the key feature of our HIF design is that it allows the different exchanges to coexist together. So similar to what the telecom exchanges are in the country, we have different telecom exchanges owned by Bharti Airtel or Vodafone or anybody, Jio or anybody, and they still coexist together, and they are able to connect your calls from the source to the destination point without any disruption. So our HIF layer allows all the mediation, orchestration, and routing of the patient data requests across the framework from whatever exchanges it is originated from. So these exchanges can be owned by government, these can be owned by the center or the different states, and this can even be maintained by the different private ecosystem players for their own specific requirements. But all these different exchanges can talk to each other through the gateway components, and HIF will provide the underpinnings for that. Next slide, please. So this is one of the use case, where we are showing how our HIF design can fulfill the disease surveillance and disease registry part. So in the bottom, you can see at present, different health workers are involved in collecting the screening data of the patient, the suspected cases for COVID, and they fill the S form. Basically, this IDSP has developed several standard form templates for collecting the data. So S form is for all the suspected cases, P is for probable cases, and L are all the lab confirmed cases. So assuming that the health worker goes to the patient place and they identify the suspected cases and they fill the S form, so all that data is loaded into the IDSP repositories directly, because it's a form-based application which is feeding the data into the repository. Now the other scenario is that same patient goes to a facility, be it on the public side or any private hospital side. They go to the facility where doctor do some sort of diagnosis and order some lab tests. So before doing it, doctor also want to see any past medical records of the patient to actually judge the right diagnosis for the patient. So what it does is it does a lookup on the different registries, which is on the extreme left side, and specifically the disease registry part to find the IDs of that patient. So once they find the ID of that patient, then they can search through our record locator service. They can connect to the different registries and repositories in the framework, and they can fetch all the past records of the patient. So based on that past record, a doctor can do a well-judged evaluation of patient conditions and do a informed diagnosis making for the patient. Then whatever treatment for that patient is done in the hospital, our framework, using that framework, again, that complete data can be sent across to the different repositories to store in there. So it can be stored in different patient repositories, as well as the different EHR repositories that I mentioned, whether it is owned by fiduciaries or whether it is owned by the hospital. So so now that this data has come in all the repositories, and it will be populated into the disease registry also. So there will be APIs provided to load the data from different repositories automatically into the disease registry. And disease registry, once the data has come in the disease registry, then different agencies can do the analysis of that data. They can do the cohort analysis. They can review the outcomes, progression of the disease, and the patient conditions based on treatment given. So that complete scientific study of the disease they can do using this disease registry. At same time, data will be fed into the different state lakes from the disease registry part. So these state lakes, anonymized or de-identified data will be saved, The basic difference between anonymized and de-identified in technical term is de-identified data can be recovered back. If you want, you can restore the PHI, which is a patient health information again. But anonymized data is irreversible. So once you have kind of encrypted the health IDs, then you cannot recover it back. So in the disease scenarios, the data need to be de-identified rather than anonymizing it, because states need to track these patients and they need to do the contact tracing and all these things. So, so then, from the state lakes, they can further send the limited data set to the central lake for the MIS indicators and the KPIs thing. And, here at this analytical layer, we can have the AI and ML for doing not only the conventional analytical, analysis, but also the predictive and the prescriptive analytics, which is more advanced, and they can find out, more deeper insights from that data analytics. And using the visualization layer, these different reports can be displayed through different delivery channels to all the stakeholders. So be it the mobile applications or the IDSP report portal or whatever. So this is a small use case. We have sort of done a design of that, and we are happy to collaborate with the FCA members and the MAP partners on one side to develop it further, and we are happy to talk to the state partners who have the appetite to implement this, to actually implement the COVID registry and the disease surveillance mechanism using our HIE. Yeah, so that was a brief introduction from my side. Please feel free to ask any questions.
Sumit here again. So I just had one query here. Like, for example, currently at Rajasthan, we are collaborating with UNICEF Rajasthan for collecting a lot of survey data, right? So what these guys do is they create on-the-fly forms, right? For example, using an Excel sheet, which gets automatically converted to an XML, and then they upload an XML frameworks like ODK, UNA. A lot of other open source already available frameworks do that, of course. So even if the user interface seems structured, the data behind that is still a little bit not to the spec or not to a guideline. Rather, something that they come up with a quick and dirty solution to work for a solution to fix a given problem at hand. And then we also gather a lot of outreach information at the same time, right? So my concern is, like, in both these cases, like in the case of outreach as well as the survey data collection, which we are currently doing in Rajasthan, I don't see any specifications or any kind of objects that you have already created, or if you have created, probably I'm unaware. So I just wanted you to shed some light on that front. Because we have moved on from the HIS EMR and the EHR side of the story to now to outreach and survey data collection, right? And because of this COVID thing, a lot of ground the actual ground force in the form of ASHA workers and the other health workers will also be moving around to basically help the general public, right, in the time of this critical situation, right? So I just wanted to understand what is Access Health been doing to basically cater to this spectrum of the problem that we are currently faced with. I hope I made myself clear.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if an implementation we have done. Krishan, would you have any answer to that? It's still at design stage. What Krishan presented is still at design stage. The only implementation that I know is UniMedNet that was presented earlier. But Krishan, whatever you can.
But from I think from a survey perspective that Sumit is asking about, I don't think any particular implementation has been done. Some degree of design maybe, but it's an area perhaps we need to work together going forward.
Yes. So
yeah, so that's true. So NDHP has laid out the specifications only, and now NDHM has come, whose prime responsibility will be to implement this federated architecture. So that is still in the design phase, but a lot of components are, we are already rolling out, and we have been talking about it, like all the data standardization thing. We need the translators, and we need the e-object thing that we are already working on and releasing it in the open source. Then all the e-object related things, FHIR-based standards, we have developed the e-object design, which will be used for interoperability. And simultaneously, I'm working on the interoperability API side, which will sort of standardizing all the APIs for the data exchange thing. So once then we will start a close collaboration with NDHM and the government to discuss this design and bring it in the implementation. So that will become a part of specification.
So on the survey side, Sumit, we couldn't do at the implementation level, but for the COVID situation, we definitely defined a subset of the entire e-object that can be used for screening. So again, you will be able to generate that standardized e-object either by providing an interface using a mobile app or by converting your XML into a required JSON. You can do that. So we had created that.
See, my question was not towards the technology part of the problem. That's already been taken care of. My main concern was, is there a guideline? See, currently we are like whatever UNICEF designs or decides is the final format or the structure of the survey form, for example, right? So if you look at open source tools like ODK, ONA, or Kobo Toolbox, for example, they provide on-the-fly form creation and then data capturing based on the form design. You can basically do an offline or an online sort of a survey data capture. Okay, what I'm really concerned about is, if in these cases, is there a guideline or is there an e-object specification for, like, there are a lot of surveys, like for example, they do surveys for like iron deficiency in young girls, right, across schools, right? So they run these programs as well. So are we doing something in that area as well, is what my question is. It's more towards the specification and the governance side of the story rather than the technology aspect.
So the only way out today for doing that is when you are creating the forms on fly, the only base, that recommendation that we can give, and we have already given to one of our SCM member who also does surveys, they have a survey platform, use MDDS as a base. So you will always have the standard data. Even the 4 field that you use in the form, use MDDS core value sets and MDDS specifications, and you're good to go. And you are complied. There's a that's a notified guideline even by ministry. If you will look at the EHR standard, it clearly mandates at least the demographic of the patient should be in MDDS format, so that it is interoperable across the country.
Yeah, so one more thing, Sumit. So regarding the specification part for data collection, let us say for COVID thing, there are already SP and T forms, published by IDSP, which is a base template for collecting all the disease-related data, particularly for COVID. And then for all the e-object structures, already it is mentioned in NDHP to adopt FHIR Release 4, and you can use the different resources out of the 143 resource list there. And what we have done is we have considered the standard specifications published by, let us say, MCI and the different entities who are responsible for generating these specifications, and we have designed our e-object structures based on that. Now, what is required is once NDHM comes in place, so we have already even defined the India specific profile. So as this was a question coming in the afternoon, so we need to publish these APIs through these profiles through a standard mechanism through the government, so that all the vendors can adopt it. For that, we need a FHIR registry, so that will happen once NDHM will start functioning in full flow. So ultimately, all the specification thing, and for the payer-related objects and the e-discharge summary, as Dr. Pankaj said, we have already been working with NHA and IRDA, and as part of that team, they have decided the structures of claim-related objects and the discharge summary object, which will also be adopted in the provider side. So that is the current progress happening on the specification side, but that will be given legal structure once NDHM comes in real play.
I was basically more looking towards a sort of a repository of existing surveys that the government or the state government or the central government does at any point in time, so that we could just basically refer to that repository and then pull out any of the forms and start doing surveys whenever required, whenever demanded, right, from the state agencies or the government agencies at any level, right? So that is what I was basically looking for. So that is one feedback that I have. So we should basically, we as a group or this initiative should also look forward to basically creating that sort of a repository which will basically be beneficial mostly towards the public sector, because the surveys and these things happen generally at a large scale for state and government data capturing and data gathering purposes. So that is where I was basically coming from. So this is something
Yeah,
that we should,
that is good. I think we should look at it quite clearly, Sumit. I take your point, and maybe we can look at it together, and you can help us, publish these things together onto GitHub and let the nation take it forward along with you. Apart from that, there's on the data side, as Priyanka said, one solution that we did find to get this standardization through is to get the original data in MDDS form wherever possible. That is one solution that has been tried and also, implemented. I think in West Bengal, right, Priyanka? Okay. So let's take this and see what we can do together.
Can I just ask one thing, Sumit? The forms that you're talking about, can't the parameters already covered under e-encounter cover all those details that are covered in the form for a survey? Because we also do a lot of risk assessment in rural areas, and I think all the information that we capture can actually be captured under the e-object parameters.
Yes. Also, to add what what Anurag said, yes, e-object contains, you can take out the subset. The second thing which we also did with Rajasthan government when we were interacting with you, Sumit, was we had given the entire bundle for the outreach module. That has all the elements UNICEF can use to generate those forms. Second, MDDS, if you read MDDS in detail, it also have those standard indicators already coded in a standard format that can be used for these kind of surveys. So it has covered all health program surveys already. So just maybe have a look, or maybe let's have a call and I can discuss this in detail with you, because we have given all the required inputs already to the Rajasthan government, even when the UNICEF talk was going on. And we feared that. We feared the data standardization issue there.
Okay.
Okay, so shall we wrap up? If there are no other questions, it's been a long day.
One last suggestion from my side, Dr. Pankaj, would be that as you guys have been closely interacting with the government and have sort of some sort of leverage in terms of the policy making or the creation of actual RFPs that are basically published at the end of it all. What we generally see is we all talk about the good things, right? So we say, okay, we should be technology agnostic and all that stuff, right? But that is only valid for private endeavors. Generally, what happens with government agencies, like for example, we are locked with Rajasthan. We are locked with Oracle with Rajasthan, right? So we can't choose our own database solution also, and we can't even suggest scalable sort of distributed sort of a database there, right? So how do you think this thing will change, or how can you help to influence this change in the government, where they are basically very restrictive in terms of the technology set that they allow? Like for example, in Rajasthan, they don't even allow PHP applications to be hosted normally, right? They allow it, but when you start vetting it and then you go into that approved technology stack, then it is not even allowed. So how does it play for small vendors or vendors who basically provide niche services? Then they are locked with technology, right? So this is something that has to be taken care of. Even we are facing that challenge. So sometimes we want to try something innovative and suggest something. It basically goes through a long drawn process, and then we get stuck into that loop, and then it is a big battle to fight. So any kind of leverage or influence that you guys can have, or change this existing scenario, it would really be great for the entire community, in fact.
Sumit, first of all, we would like to believe that we have influence, but I'm not really sure how much of influence we really have.
Okay.
So we do go and give our suggestions, and many partners in the government do listen to us. Um, really thankful that many of them attended the full day session with us today. So to that extent, yes, we do have some degree of so where we can go and say and they will listen. Having said that, on the procurement side, we have voiced our opinion that exactly what you're saying are issues, and that is the reason we brought MAP to the table. So the role of MAP is to restructure the procurement for startups and innovative units, so that exactly those challenges are taken care of. So hopefully, walk the talk will happen, and it will not be just another program. The people who are running MAP as of now are, I feel, the right set of people. So I feel, really things will happen there. Procurement changes will happen as far as the MAP is concerned. Now, how will the procurement changes that happen in MAP be reflecting on the rest of the ecosystem is something I cannot say as of now. But clearly, Modi ji has his ear close to MAP, because the grand challenge was announced by Modi ji, and MAP is running it. So he's clearly watching, right? So let's see, if we can demonstrate a success in MAP and then take it forward.
Thanks.
Okay, so Balaji, any last words? I mean, I and Dr. Balaji have worked extensively in product companies, services companies, on open platforms, and that is the reason we I lean on him so much, and whenever the work like this has to be done. And hats off to Dr. Balaji, Priyanka, Akriti, and the entire analyst team that we have, plus Ved and Apurva, and the team that supports on the technical side, and Krishan. So hats off to my team to put this together. It was not easy to do it on a webinar, the whole day session, because when you are physically present in a room, something not working, you can fix it. But if something doesn't work on a webinar, then there's going to be a gap and chaos. And I did not see any chaos happen in all day. It went like a clockwork, thanks to the entire team. Balaji, any words you have before we sort of close the session? Priyanka, anything you would want to say to your team? This is the time.
I just want to convey my thanks, because I really appreciate their belief in us and listening to us and taking out their valuable time, even though they are busy serving their current customers. But I'm just thankful to have them here with us. And I would like to extend all my help. Any component we discussed today, you need help on, you want to implement, reach out to me. We'll set up a separate call with the teams. We are always here to help.
Dr. Balaji, anything you would want to add?
Not really. This has been very, at least for me, very uplifting and very inspirational. Simply because it's a long-standing desire to see digital health and healthcare IT in India flower and really benefit, the ultimate goal, the patient and the doctor relationship. I would encourage everybody to read Rabindranath Tagore's "Where the Mind is Without Fear." That encompasses really what we all should stand for and what we should execute. It's a wonderful poem, and it's worth standing by.
Wonderful. Thank you. Arun, would you want to share your thoughts Arun is the person who runs, the entire go-to-market for us. He is the person who makes us known in all the circles on the administrative side as well as on the market side. So, Arun, if you would have any words.
So I must admit that this is my first boot camp, although it should not have been, but it is. And when you do what I do, just like Pankaj described, you need inspiration and you need encouragement. And today's session was very, very uplifting, validation of all the work that our team does, and exciting. And you guys energize us. You guys energize us to do everything that we do day in and day out. So keep going. We are here to support you, and you're doing great work, guys, all of you.
Thank you, Arun. And I can't thank everybody enough for being through the entire day. It's been a long day, and I saw the attendance at the highest point went to 57, 58 people, and that's really wonderful. And in the post-lunch session, also having about 50 people attending it. Oh wow, I just love it. Thank you so much, everybody. And we will stay connected. There is a LinkedIn group that has been created so that our conversations continue beyond the bootcamp. And this was a demand from all of you guys to create a LinkedIn group or a social media group where all of us could interact. So now we have a WhatsApp group anyways, but in addition to that, we also have a LinkedIn group. It's going to be a closed group for only the SCA members for now. I'm not going to open it up until we've reached a point where we can open it up to everybody else. So please join that group, and we can have these discussions continuing on the LinkedIn group also. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And I think we will close the session now.